I thought we already talked about Gainesville before, didn't we?
Well,
I thought it was something about McClellan.
I don't.
Oh, what was that? I was putting up there. I thought it was no. I remember what it was. Did after Antietam, did McClellan or did Lincoln pull the trigger too quick on McClellan?
Oh, there you go. That's it. Yeah.
What a question. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a question that's a lot of people say yes, a lot of people say most people say yes. I think it's a question that's worthy of a discussion. I mean, did he pull the trigger too quick? I mean,
well, that army was a total mess when he took it over. After Pope left it, and he had to piece together. He had several new corps commanders, and all the ones under them were new, and there were a lot of new people that had never seen battle before, including the 20th Maine. I think that was they set that one out. That was the first battle they showed up at, I think, and they set it out. They were part of the 6th Corps, I guess.
Hey, Chris, can you hold on just 1 second?
Yeah.
You know, I've got 275 original Civil War letters in my collection, and I love reading excerpts from them that are related to whatever it is we're talking about, you know? And
go ahead.
I got some good stuff on McClellan. If you let me haul them out real fast here, just not the whole letter, just the relevant part.
Yeah, go ahead. We'd love to do that.
It gives some really good perspective for what they were thinking at the time. Hold on, y'all talk while I do that.
I mean, McClellan. There's different things. Do you think he was timid, or do you think that the being an advisor in the Crimean War affected him?
And I don't know. I know, I'm kind of it's my study on the 7 days, and the way he acted there. I mean, he was almost cowardly. I don't think he was a coward. I think he seemed to be so afraid of hurting his army that he couldn't do anything. He let the fight on their own.
I guess coward was probably a bad word. I guess I meant that he had suffered that he had watched the horrors during the Crimean War that he just could not stomach watching his own army.
That's the thing right there.
I think that could very easily be because he had no balls at all. I mean, he saw slaughter, senseless. I mean, of course, the charge of the Light Brigade's the ultimate on that, right? And he saw that kind of slaughter going on left and right. Also, though, there was something deeper. It almost, how do I phrase this? He almost had like a mother's love for that army as opposed to a father's love.
Right.
And he wanted to take it under his wing and nurture it and protect it. I mean, my God, he was a hell of an organizer. I mean, remember Lincoln said, well, if he doesn't fight, at least he exceeds in getting guys ready to fight, And he, but somebody said, and I can't remember who, when you're a general, you love your army if you're a good general. But to be a good general, you got to wish destroying the very thing you love in battle.
It was in Gettysburg. Lee said, to be a good commander, you must love the army.
And you got to be willing to destroy the army.
To be a good soldier, you must love the army. To be a good commander, you must be willing to order the death of the thing that you love.
That's right. And McClellan just seemed really hesitant to do that. But I'll tell you one thing, gentlemen. That army, the heart of that army, the Army of the Potomac, that army belonged, their heart belonged to McClellan up until Appomattox. Now, Grant was the winner, and Grant, they celebrated Grant. But nobody ever had their affection like McClellan.
Yeah, it was strange that they did not vote for him, because the army overwhelmingly voted against him. They knew that he could not declare peace.
That's the thing. That's the thing, Tom. He had their hearts, but he didn't have their votes.
Yeah.
At the same time, he had them both. You know what I mean?
I think the reason that they did not vote for him is because they seen that Lincoln had this thing wrapped up. And they just wasn't going to change horses in midstream because, I think so many people talk about peace. Little Mac had such an ego, and he was a smart man. He knew the war was over. If he had won that race, as soon as he took the inauguration, he would have been in full military uniform on the first train to Petersburg to take field command.
Mm-hmm. Here's a letter I've got written by a Yankee soldier in the 52nd Pennsylvania Infantry in one of those fortifications around Washington. December 16th, 1861, he's writing to his brother, and they've just had a huge review of General Keyes' division. It consisted of 4 brigades that was reviewed by General McClellan's staff. It was a favorable day for the purpose, and there's kind of a funny story here. It was a very favorable day for the purpose, and quite a large number of the beauty and fashion of Washington was there to witness the scene. I stood quite near McClellan and had a good look at him to see what he looked like. He is quite robust and appears as if he gets enough to eat, wears a mustache and quite firm expression of countenance generally. Governor Morgan of New York was there, also Mrs. McClellan. Mrs. McClellan is quite young and quite good looking. She attracted great attention for it being her first appearance in public since her arrival from the West. Now get a load of this. The only laughable incident that occurred during the review was when the regiments were passing before the general. A drum major of one of the regiments was dressed up very finely and appeared as if he had a very good sense of his own importance. When he got in front of McClellan, he gave his staff a pitch into the air, intending to catch it when it came down, but unfortunately it fell in the mud and caused great laughter. Even McClellan relaxed his countenance enough to smile.
Huh.
He was going to show off in front of the big general, and that didn't work out.
That is something else. So, I've often thought that he pulled the trigger on him too quick after Antietam. Now, maybe it's because, he should have destroyed Lee's army. I mean, he only employed, a third of his combat troops?
Yeah, he had more men in reserve than Lee had on the lines.
Yeah. Lee had 39,000 men, and he had right over 90,000.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then he allowed Lee, it was almost kind of like, at Bastogne, Belgium, he allowed Lee to shift troops to meet each attack.
He did it from 3 miles away. He wasn't even on the battlefield. Lee was right there the whole time.
Right.
And that was McClellan's same problem in the 7 days, because he was not on the battlefield. He was trying to by telegraph the Gaines Mill. He was doing it by telegraph, and also by Savage's Station. He was doing it by telegraph.
Listen to this, y'all. This is a letter written February 8th, 1863 by a Yankee in the 91st Pennsylvania Infantry writing to his sister. So Burnside's just been fired and Hooker's been named, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's writing to his sister, and he said, Frank is about right in saying that no general, and so what I'm saying is McClellan is 2 commanders removed at this point.
Yep.
Okay? And this soldier is still writing, Frank is about right in saying that no general can command this army like McClellan, but our administration does not want me to think that way. They must have an idea, the way they act, that a general sent to command 100,000 men can be picked up anywhere, but I think they will wake up one of these fine mornings and find their mistake. The men did not think much of Burnside. Now they think less of less of Hooker. I know he was a good general when he had a corps and somebody to plan for him, but now that he has responsibility of the whole army resting on him, I think that he will fail, but I hope I'm mistaken. But one thing is certain, this war will continue until the administration, meaning the Lincoln administration, drops the everlasting Negro question and gets down to work in earnest. And I think they're to blame that it was not settled a year ago. I tell you, the soldiers are tired of the way they've been fooled by the bigwigs in Washington. So they were still missing McClellan going into Hooker.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the privates and the sergeants and the corporals and, the grunts.
They screamed and they hooted and hollered when they thought that before they knew that Hooker had been replaced by Meade. They knew he was replaced. They didn't know by who. And the rumor went out that it was McClellan coming back, and they were hooting and hollering up and down the line until they found out it wasn't true.
When McClellan was relieved, he got on the train. He got on a train, and soldiers swarmed the car and uncoupled the car he was from the train, so he couldn't leave. I mean, that's the amount of devotion they had to that guy.
I wonder what it was that made him so popular with them, that they was, knew that how much he cared for him, or, that he had such the affection, because it's almost like he had the type of affection that Lee had.
Yeah, I think it was very close to that. And it had to be more than just his organizational skills, because Hooker turned out to be a pretty good guy. He got him paid, he got him fed. He was doing a lot of things for him after they had really gone through hell since Antietam. They never jumped on Hooker like they did on McClellan.
He made them believe in themselves. Oh, here we go. Here's what I was looking for. This was written about the same time as that other letter, February 12th, 1863. This Yankee soldier writes, "You wanted to know what made me think so much of McClellan. Well, in the first place, I think that he is the only man that is fit to command an army as large as this, a general that can gain the confidence and love of over 100,000 men and keep it through long hours and danger of suffering is worth 40 men who are hated and despised by their followers. If you could have seen the enthusiasm caused by General McClellan's appearance on the battlefield of Malvern Hill when the shell and bullets were flying thick as hailstones, you would have thought that the whole North was shouting for him all at once. Let those who think him a traitor read the accounts of the 7 days fighting before Richmond, as it was written and published by a Prussian officer belonging to the rebel army. He said that if McClellan had had one division of fresh troops then, that Richmond would have been taken. If McClellan had been a traitor, there would have been no Army of the Potomac now except as prisoners or paroled men." So I think he made them believe in themselves. He gave them self-confidence. He was a handsome guy. He was a dashing guy. Remember, he's only like 34 years old,
Yeah, he was a very handsome man. I mean,
and that counts for something. He was young, energetic. He rode among them a lot. He wasn't a headquarters general, and they seemed to think he had their best interests at heart, the guys in the ranks.
Yeah, because he had the one battle in the West there in that West Virginia area that made his name, and then he came in, and the guys didn't really know him except from that one, and he was one of the very first heroes though. That might have been it too, that he being the first one, they kind of gravitated to him.
But he was kind of a golden boy within the War Department before the war, though. Remember, he was the official U.S. observer, and Winfield Scott had his eye on him. So he wasn't known to the general public, but within the old army, he was an up and comer.
And then he got very big. He won that battle in the West. He was one of the first victories, right?
yes,
That's right. Summer '61.
So he became the only hero that the North had, and I think maybe that had something to do with it.
Well, timing is everything, right?
Yeah.
Lee said he was scared. That was the one he was most scared of. I wonder why.
Yeah, and that's high praise coming from Robert E. Lee. You know it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he thought he was the most capable.
Mm-hmm.
The ones he faced.
And I always wondered why.
It probably was just that charisma that he had, and that the fact that he knew that the soldiers will do a lot. I mean, Lee knew that. Would do a lot just for the person if they really had love and respect for that person. So that was probably part of it.
Here's one written at the start of the Peninsula Campaign by a Yankee private near Yorktown, Virginia, April 29th, 1862. And he says, McClellan is busy reviewing the roads and breastworks. He's a nice-looking fellow, wears a private's coat. I have never, ever, ever heard
so much. Very, very appreciated. Oh, man.
We're having a go at McClellan tonight.
Oh, of course. That's fair, and understandably so. Yeah.
What's your take on him?
Oh, I think just like everybody else, influenced by what the history books say about him, but he was just too slow. He was, he was a guy who was just too, he was too gun shy. He was way too overcautious. He never took the opportunities that were in front of him. He stuffed up a lot of different, things that would have been really beneficial had he acted quicker. Yeah, that's basically my take on him.
But, you know, Tom, getting back to what you said earlier about Pinkerton. Pinkerton had this complex mathematic formula he'd come up with that was highly flawed. And then you add to that McClellan and his eagerness to believe the worst case scenario in any situation. It was just a recipe for disaster. And the problem is, if anybody had gone to Washington and pulled the 1860 census off the shelves and looked at the numbers, the evidence was there in the Census Bureau that there weren't that many men available.
It didn't have that many. That's right.
It was flawed intelligence.
But he did it. At Antietam, he found the orders, knew that Lee was split in 3 pieces, and still took 2.5 days to go after him.
Yeah.
He could have done that in one day. He could have been over South Mountain, and the war would have been over.
Can you imagine if Stonewall had got a hold of that information? Those boys would have been foot cavalry would have been flying all over the place, catching piece by piece.
So he always was just overly careful about everything he did, and he had no aggressive streak in it. He just did not want to be on the offensive, and it was crazy. He had so many chances to win that war that first couple of years.
Well, especially there. I mean, there's no way Lee should have gotten out of there.
Some was saying, of course, the Confederates are always going to underestimate, but Jubal Early said that he felt like there was no more than 35,000 men at Antietam. And
Well,
he was very far left.
Say that again. He didn't think Lee had 35,000 men.
He said that he thought about 35,000 actually crossed the river with him, because Lee gave that order that they could stay if they didn't have any shoes or had any other reason not to go, and thousands stayed on the Virginia side of the river.
So I wonder why McClellan, knowing that he's got him outnumbered that bad, why does he not just throw everything he's got against Lee? Because there's no way he could have held him off.
Well, see, that's where McClellan comes into politics comes into play. By the way, let me back up on McClellan one thing, y'all. McClellan, when he takes, he's the darling. He really becomes the poster boy for the Union war effort in early 62, late 61. You see all these patriotic envelopes and stationery with his face all over them. We talked, earlier, he was a handsome, good-looking guy, and the papers couldn't get enough of him. He was a Democrat, and it was the war was led by Republican Congress and Republican president, so that posed a problem. McClellan gave an interview in, I want to say, January 62, where he said, if I could have my way, I'd take the Navy and steam it down to South Carolina, and I'd blow Charleston, South Carolina off the face of the earth. And everyone was like, yeah. Then, without stopping to catch his breath, he says, then I would steam up to Boston and I'd blow Boston away, because those were the two extremists that caused this war.
Huh.
And that did not go over real well in certain quarters. McClellan was not an abolitionist. Okay, McClellan, he steered clear of that, and to the radical Republicans within the Republican ranks, right off the bat, there was all this, well, is he really one of us, or is he a secret traitor? And then what you were saying, Chris, he's got all these men at Antietam, why doesn't he attack? You know? So, and remember that letter I mentioned where the guy said, you know, he didn't push on through, and, you know, so there was certain segments, it was a minority, but it was there that McClellan's really a traitor because his heart's not really in the Union cause.
Hmm.
So that was.
I don't know. I mean, there was, you know, probably most of the army they were quite upset with the emancipation when it first came out.
Oh, I'm not saying it's right or fair, Tom. I'm just saying it existed. That's all.
Yeah,
because you know a lot of people. There's a myth that the Union, the Northern people, you know, were all abolitionists, and that almost ended the war. I mean, when they found out, they said, "Hey, we're not going down here to fight this war over that." I mean, you can read numerous accounts of that.
My take on the situation is the average. There were some guys who were abolitionists all through. That was their prime motivation, free the slaves. They were a minority. I'm talking about in the army.
Yes, they were.
They were a minority. They existed.
They were a small minority.
They were a small minority. The rest of the troops wanted the Union preserved. They didn't like slavery, but if slavery went away in the process, so much the better. You know what I'm saying?
I want to say something right there, okay? And I want y'all to think about it for just a second. All of our life, we've heard that, you know, preserve the Union. You know, we was there to preserve the Union. We fought to preserve the Union. That sounds great. That sounds noble. I don't think it had a damn thing to do with it. What I think what it had to do with is they fired on Fort Sumter, and it pissed those Northern boys off, and they came down there to get some vengeance.
Well, I will say this: the decision to fire on Fort Sumter was one of the worst decisions of the entire war.
I don't know what were they thinking. I mean,
their thinking was, look, we're trying to let Europe know that we're an independent nation, and here in the harbor of one of our major cities is a fort by a foreign power. How can we claim we're an independent nation if we allow that?
All right. Here's I thought this through. You're a confederacy, so you're basically, you know, essentially separate nations. Governor of South Carolina signs a decree giving Fort Sumter back to the North, saying they no longer need it. You've got yourself out of it. Lincoln was a genius. He baited the South into firing the first shot.
Absolutely, he did. You're right.
And when he got them to, then it came off the South as being the sympathetic to the North being sympathetic, and they played right into his hand.
Yeah, it was terribly strategic. It was a political decision and not a military decision, and it was catastrophic.
And I don't know if
that's the other reason you said there, that also because it stirred up the patriotism in the North, and you had a lot of guys that just joined up because they were pissed off.
Right, because they were pissed off that how dare you fire on us?
Yeah.
But what happens? But now flip that coin on the other side, Tom. And you're right. But let's look at the other way. What happens 2 days after Sumter surrenders? Lincoln issues his call for troops to put down the rebellion, and that drives the Upper South out.
Yeah, drives 4 states out of the Union.
Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas secede. And Missouri, Big Three, Missouri, Kentucky, and Maryland, they're seriously wavering.
Maryland and would have gone if they had any possibility of doing it. But
that's right.
But they took Baltimore before they could get their act together, and they took St. Louis before they.
That's right.
Better get their act together.
That's right. The governor of Missouri, I'm born and raised in Missouri, so the war in Missouri is real.
Yeah, my folks come from Missouri. Yeah.
Well, the governor, Claiborne Fox Jackson, was a secessionist through and through.
Yep.
But speaking of bad political timing, he called a state convention to say people elected these delegates to the state convention to decide do we secede or not, but he tripped all over himself in January 61, and he wanted to lead him out and join the Confederacy. Well, there wasn't any reason at that point. So the convention said no. If he'd waited just 60, 90 days longer, it would have been a whole different story.
Yeah, they done the same thing Virginia did. Yeah.
That's right.
And boy, that could have made a difference because Missouri was a big deal. That was a lot of area, a lot
really
of
was.
food.
Well, I mean, you think if you had just a couple of those border states, you know, Kentucky, Missouri, you got to get some game changers there. You've got more territory you've got to conquer. More people to subdue. I'm not saying the Union couldn't have conquered it. Because I was in a discussion with somebody the other night, and they kept saying, they was arguing with me the Confederacy had to win. I said the Confederacy did not have to win; they just had to not lose.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But remember, Lincoln says in 1861 famously, "I think to lose to Kentucky is the same as to lose the whole game."
Yes, it is.
Yep.
And I wonder why that was so important. I mean, because it was right there on the Ohio. I wonder why he thought that was so important.
That's one reason, and the other reason is rivers. Those rivers.
True.
You got to think of those rivers as interstate highways.
That's
Right.
And the Cumberland, the Tennessee flow into the Ohio and Kentucky, and those were the routes they used. Remember at the first start of the theater, in the Western Theater. So yeah, and then of course it's right there on the river. If you lose it, then you've suddenly got to defend Southern Indiana, Southern Ohio, Southern Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a long stretch to defend. I don't know how many miles. It's hundreds.
So I'm writing my I got to publish it now, or start publishing some of the chapters I'm behind. I finished my Richmond graduate now, so I've got my my alternate history story, The Resistance. I'm having fun with that one because I've obviously wondered because speaking with somebody the other day, I said, look, if Lee would have found a way outside of Appomattox, he would have kept going. He was not going to quit. I don't care if they took the wood, what they had to do. I mean, you could have had a guerrilla war out of that. Sorry, we got off the case of McClellan there. So let me go back to him. So after 1862, when he got relieved of command after Antietam, he got sent to desk job.
And even that, it was kind of a vague job. It wasn't.
I thought it was up in like up north somewhere.
Oh yeah. It wasn't a field command. Hold on a second. Let me look it up real fast.
Yeah, I knew he never had another field command.
And then, of course, he had to resign the Army and he ran for president.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, one thing real quick to go back to what you said, Chris, a minute ago about Lee's options, at Appomattox.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is a Confederate soldier is riding in a rail car. He's riding home after the surrender. And by the way, that's one of the great myths. The long walk home from Appomattox, the majority of them took trains. Now,
yeah, they were given passes.
They're given passes. The thing of it is, though, is, you had to get out at the nearest stop, and a lot of them then had to walk 15, 20, 30, 40 miles home from the nearest depot, But they didn't walk all the way back from Virginia like a lot of them think. But anyway, this guy's riding, this Confederate soldier, he's just surrendered at Appomattox with Lee. And in the car, there's a planter who's obviously set the war out, right?
Yeah.
And he looks at the soldier and says, excuse me, sir. He goes, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but couldn't you all have taken to the mountains and kept the war going for 2 or 3 more years? And the soldier looks at him long and hard and says, friend, in the last 3 years, I was wounded twice. I've been shot at. I froze. I was captured and held a POW for 6 months. And I'm plumb tickled with the way things turned out. He was going home, and he lived to tell about it.
But yeah, I want to say something like that right there, because somebody was asking me about that if I thought something like that could take place, and I said, look, when he and I know that some men, their bodies gave out and just couldn't take it no more. I said, but when he abandoned the trenches at Petersburg with his 25, 30, 35,000 men, I said, they were marching 22 hours a day and they were still going with him. I said, they would have followed him to the gates of hell.
They
if
really
that's where
would.
if that's where he said to go. I mean, if he said, let's make this last stand at Appomattox Courthouse, and by God, we'd be talking about last stand at Appomattox Courthouse today.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. They
And
live
by
in
the
the
way,
rest.
I've never understood. I mean, I understand he was desperate. So the strategy is, okay, we're going to link up with Joe Johnston, right?
Now, hold on. Let me stop you right there. Okay. That is a myth. You'll hear people say that. There was only one time that was ever mentioned, and it was mentioned in a cabinet meeting. It was mentioned in passing. Okay. Now, and here I'd like to further expand on it. Here you are. You got two armies. Now you're trying to find Joe Johnston in North Carolina. You're trying to coordinate this link up, coordinate it where with no communication, and find each other and then link up. It's impossible. Militarily, it was impossible for them to have some kind of link up like that.
Well, just for hypothetical situations, let's say they had really done it, right?
Okay.
So Lee joins up with Johnston. Grant would have joined up with Sherman.
Right.
I mean, it just kind of complicates the problem even. It doesn't make anything go away.
Well, see, and let me see, and Tom can probably vouch for this too, because Tom was a military man in Vietnam, and when you're in war, and even close to the end or whatever, and you're defeated, in your mind, you're not thinking we've lost. You're thinking of, let's get resupplied, keep moving, and we'll fight another day. You're not thinking about giving up. You're thinking about, how else can we win this war? Defeat, surrender is not on your mind.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that's a fair statement, Tom?
Well, until the point where what we're talking about here, though, is these guys were starving before they ever moved out of the trenches. You're right. They walked for another week without eating, without sleeping. And then at some
their
point,
bodies
they give out physically. They did.
Their bodies had given out, but when they abandoned those, Peters, they abandoned those trenches. Lee's thought, and here's just my opinion. Lee's thought was get out of here, get resupplied at Danville, get my army fed, get them back on the march, get some distance between me and Grant, and we'll figure the rest out later.
Yeah, and then you come back, and once they're out maneuvering again, Lee's Lee. Lee lost his year there sitting in Petersburg. That was the second dumbest thing. Firing on Fort Stewart was the first dumbest thing, and the second one was staying in. They should have just given up Richmond 6 months early.
I said they should have gave up. I said they should have gave up Richmond in August of 1864 because you still had plenty of supplies in North Carolina, and just shortening your supply lines and set up just a new base of operations and use the mountains.
Been decimated yet? Yeah, they had a lot of options.
But though, there's an intangible quality. The North, for instance, all during the war, the North was fixated on recapturing Fort Sumter. That held a huge psychological sway over them, right? Militarily, it wouldn't have mean diddly squat, but they kept trying to take Fort Sumter over and over and over throughout the war. Richmond had become so symbolic to the Confederacy that giving it up, I don't know if they could overcome that or not.
Well, I would like to say something like that too. That what you guys in, and I'll do this post again one time, and I have about. I have a large number of people that do agree with me with this, and another large tell me I'm crazy. But I say that Vicksburg should have been abandoned in 1862, because by the time Donelson and New Orleans fell, that city was of no military value whatsoever. They should have got their men and guns out and saved their military, and saved their army, and lived to fight another day. It became symbolic to the South because it was the Gibraltar of the South. It was kind of like Stalingrad.
Yeah. And add to that, the president lived right down the road. Jefferson Davis's home was just down the road from Vicksburg. That was his backyard. He was not going to let that fall. Now, I'm not saying that's right militarily, right? Strategically. But as far as reality, the reality situation, he wasn't going to give up Vicksburg without a fight.
Let's say that, obviously he didn't win a major battle, but or let's say something happens, Lee gave him the slip and they didn't get the battle, or something happened, but McClellan retains command. How does this play out now? I mean, because you got Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville. I mean, does Lee ultimately end up destroying McClellan's army in a maneuver and winning the war? Or does McClellan do what, Tom?
Well, yeah, I think that's a very good chance. Days, McClellan, I mean, he totally folded. At Mechanicsville, he was all set to make the charge the next day and win the war. He panicked himself out, and he wrote a letter to his wife that night saying that he was going to go all the way down to James. He didn't know that until 3 days later, but he had already made his mind up to do a full retreat. And then the next day at Gaines Mill, he wasn't there. He was down the road a bit. And then at Savage's Station, the same thing. And when at Glendale, he was on a damn gunboat.
You think McClellan, if the South part out of won the war with McClellan as the general?
He just would have ever made any he would have tried to do another Grand Peninsula type thing, either doing it overland or going back to the peninsula again, although I don't think Lincoln would let him do that. But he would get to that same point and then just and Lee would run all over him. Sooner or later, Lee was going to get lucky and beat the hell out of
him. So we talked about, him being a young, good-looking guy. How was he in such favor that he got command of this army?
Say that question again.
You broke up. That's we couldn't hear.
I'm sorry, guys. We were talking about earlier. He was, charming, nice-looking, young. How did he gain so much favor, and who with that he got command of this army?
Well, he was a golden boy before the war, and he had the first victory of the war for the North.
That's right.
Tom nailed it. He'd won those victories in West Virginia,
right.
And there wasn't really anybody else on the horizon on the Union side to offer it to.
Nobody. Everybody else had been beat.
Refresh my memory. Was that Lee he beat in West Virginia, and how was he aggressive during these battles?
I think some folks were saying it was a terrain more so than anything else that in West Virginia that decided against Lee there. Apparently, it wasn't so much the like the actual tactics on either side, but it was just the more mountainous terrain that Lee was unable to really effectively cope with to enable him to win victories like he did later on in in the eastern part of the state. That's what some folks reckon.
Well, Melvin, was McClellan aggressive during this, or was it just how it played out?
I mean, just how it played out, basically. From what I understand, it was just how it played out. Yeah, I think it was more so. I think I think from what I understand, West Virginia, I think they had the Unionists there had the advantage of interior lines, which they were able to better use from their heartland to repel any Confederate incursions into that territory. That's the way I understand it.
Well, Lee also had two generals there that absolutely hated each other, and they did not work together. And when he tried to coordinate them, they purposely sort of screwed each other over.
Who were they,
Mhm.
Tom?
And
Rosecrans.
I can't remember who they were, but
Rosecrans was one.
no, I'm talking about his own generals, the Confederate generals.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I think they right. Yeah,
Yeah,
confused.
both
Rosecrans.
were less than great generals to start with, and then they really didn't like each other, and they were not working together, and that's why Davis actually sent Lee over there to try to be the guy that could pull them together, and he couldn't make them work either.
It was just a mess.
Yeah.
Just a mess.
Remember one time he got his troops all ready to go and had his team moved up over the mountains, so all the ready to make a flank attack on the big Union. The other wing of his army never showed up, so he just had officers that he could trust and work with. So that was another part of the problem.
Did
Mhm.
did Little Mac give his self the nickname Little Napoleon?
The young Napoleon. He was the
Young Napoleon.
Yeah, I think the young Napoleon was what they called it.
Mhm.
And
By
Lips
the way,
will be short.
y'all were talking about, I just absolutely love this. You were talking about Lee in 61. Right before he sent to West Virginia, I got a letter, just got this recently. I just love this, by a guy in the 21st Virginia, written in Richmond on June 30th, right?
61 or
60, I'm sorry, 61.
61. Okay.
So right before Lee Lee's about to go to West Virginia.
Yep.
President Davis and General Lee came out to the dress parade yesterday evening, and I had a good look at both. The president has a very pleasing look and conversed with a good many of the soldiers and shook hands with as many as could get to him and bowed to all the companies that passed before him, while General Lee looked savage as a meat axe and appeared in finer style than the president. Wow. Savage as a meat axe. That says an awful lot, doesn't it?
Mhm. Mm.
You know, one thing.
Chris, you were asking earlier about what McClellan did after he was fired.
Yes.
He was ordered to go to Trenton, New Jersey, and await further orders.
That's
And
it.
no further orders ever came.
That's what I remembered. That they never really
Never
put
did. He spent all of 1863 writing, well, all but until into October, two incredibly huge reports on the Peninsula Campaign and the Antietam Campaign, which of course made him look in the both possible light. They came out in late October 63. The government didn't want to print them because it was obvious McClellan was getting ready to run for president at that time, and they didn't want to turn him into, de facto campaign literature. But they had to go ahead and print them. And that was the end of that was the end of Little Mac's Civil War experience.
One thing I'd like to say here is sorry about that. Is that when McClellan was basically at the enemy of the gates. That was a bold move by Davis to bring Lee out from desk duty to face a commander who had beat him earlier and just throw him at him.
Mm.
Yeah, but Lee was more than just a desk officer, though. He was known and recognized. And again, what options did Davis have?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. But I guess my point is you've already got commanders out there who are on the ground and who are apprised of the situation.
Right.
And there you've got a guy back in Richmond who's really not aware of what is going on and unaware of the unfolding situation as it happens. And you bring him out.
Lee was responsible for Jackson doing the Valley campaign.
That's right.
I mean, Lee was very much involved with everything that was going on, including what Joe Johnston was doing around Richmond. So,
right. That's a big difference, though, Tom, than being, up there in the midst of it, than being back in Richmond, you know,
Well, they were only 6 miles away.
I understand, but that's still that's still a good bit of way, as opposed to being right there, abreast of everything that's going on.
Being on the front line as opposed to being in headquarters.
Right.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, yeah, you got a point, but I guess my point was that Lee was very much involved in the strategy, and I think that he probably understood probably what Johnson was doing than Davis did, because Davis Johnson didn't get.
Now, I don't know if y'all have listened to any of me and Lucas Wilder, the Wilder historian. Me and him have a bi-monthly show that we've been doing now on the Civil War, and we was talking about some of this other night. And he is of the opinion that Lee was not going to be the permanent commander, that Davis was going to put somebody else as the commander, but the way Lee just knocked him back off away from the gates, that he decided to stay with him.
That's interesting. I've never heard that.
I had never heard that either. And he said he couldn't say it was 100%, but he said he had heard some historians say it. If you've not watched any of them, you should check them out. They're very excellent.
Well, it makes sense because Davis has got to deal with the crisis. Like Tom said, they're 6 miles down the road, right? So he's got to do the best he can make the best decision he can real fast. So Lee's at hand, so he grabs.
Sorry, I'm just needing to let you guys know I should run now. Sorry, guys, but yeah, it was great to meet you in person.
Nice to meet you finally, Melvin.
Nice to meet you, sir.
We'll have it more, Melvin.
Okay. Catch you next time, fellas. I look forward to it next time around. See you again soon, fellas. Bye.
Take care.
Likewise.
I mean, it's just amazing. And I could be totally wrong on this, but I think, and Joe Johnston had not got shot, McClellan would have won the war then.
Well, he might have gone ahead and done that frontal assault that he should have done anyway.
Yeah.
Because his plan to start the, his offensive started on the 25th, which was the day one of the 7 days. And his next plan, what he wanted to do there was just to go another 1,000 yards or so up to get some high ground to put another siege gun up there. He was still thinking in terms of siege. He still did not want to do attack. But he probably would have, the way Johnson was, they're both very, very much the same. They're very defensive minded, and nobody he didn't want to take any kind of undue risk. And
no one to fight.
I am not a Joe Johnston fan. And I believe
go ahead.
If Johnston had not been wounded, it would have been Atlanta. He would have withdrawn from Richmond eventually,
I don't know if he would have actually withdrawn from. I don't know if Davis would have allowed him to do that. I think Davis would have probably changed commanders before he allowed that.
Probably.
But I am not a Joe Johnston fan either. I was just looking at some maps today of the Atlanta campaign and the mountain passes up there, and where there were just very few passes for him to get through, and how he let him get through there. They praise him for his Fabian strategy. Fabian strategy is very successful, but it also has to do with a place where you have lots of territory, like in Russia, where Russia could trade territory for time.
Yeah,
you can't trade that much territory in Georgia. He gave up, I think, 100 miles in 66 days. Can you imagine Robert E. Lee giving up 100 miles in 66 days?
Oh.
As far as when I was looking at this, I was thinking about the Union commanders and Union generals, and as opposed to obviously, Grant and Sherman. I would have to rank McClellan probably right behind those two. When you can look at the guys like Pope and Hooker and Burnside.
Hooker wasn't a bad guy. Hooker had a great plan at Chancellorsville. He pulled it off successfully. he had taken a totally demoralized, probably somebody with an army that was in bad a shape as it was after Antietam, after Fredericksburg, and turned it around. And then he ended up getting, shell shocked and didn't turn over the reins to anyone. That's what really happened at Chancellorsville, I believe.
He had, I mean, and that could have been it that late, but he has Lee trapped between an army twice Lee's size in a vice grip, and he digs in.
Yeah. When he called them back out of after they broke out of the wilderness, Meade and whoever else it was had gotten out of the wilderness, and he called them back in. But it was his plan was to let Lee attack him, in those defensive in the woods, and it might have worked if he had kept his act together and called in his reserves and things that he didn't do that day. You don't know. But Hooker wasn't that bad. I mean, and then on the Atlanta campaign, he did very well. He performed. But he was not the Army commander, though.
He does very good at Lookout Mountain and throughout the bulk of the Atlanta campaign, and he doesn't get credit for it.
But remember, some guys are meant to be offensive coordinators. Some guys are meant to be head coaches.
Right.
Yeah. But I'd put him, if you're ranking generals, I'd have to put him as number 3 or 4 in that group. I mean, what he did was good, except for screwing up one day, right? And he had a concussion when he did it. So give him a little break.
Okay, I can slide him a break on that. I mean, everybody has a bad day on occasion.
That day just happened to come on the worst day of his career, though.
Yeah.
Now, I think cover everything. And I'll cut this part out unless y'all got anything else y'all want to add about McClellan, because I wanted to talk to y'all something in private.
One more second. Was he hit before or after he called for taking the people off of what was the grove? Shady Grove, the high ground?
I don't remember. I thought he got hit.
I think he did it after he was shell shocked. I think that was his downfall.
I can't remember exactly how he got shell shocked.
Tom, you can't take away he left his right flank up in the air.
He did that.
That's true. That is true.
He did that.
And Sherman and Stewart found it.
But that wouldn't have stopped them. I mean, they were stopped on day 3. They fought them to a standstill right there. So, the 11th Corps crushed and all that good stuff. But the next day, they were ready to fight, and they could have fought, and they probably could have won if, again, the general had not been knocked unconscious.
And he had, I think, 2 or 3 corps that he never even engaged.
Yeah, they were still on the north of the. Well, they weren't north of the river, but they were north of the battlefield, right? They were staged up there on the north, and never called up to action.
Well, I'll tell you something else, too, that he never gets credit for that did go right, was taking Fredericksburg and driving the Confederates out of Marye's Heights.
You talking about the first or second Fredericksburg?
The second Fredericksburg.
Second, yeah.
Yes.
That went very well according to plan, and was part of Hooker's grand strategy. And everybody just kind of glosses over that.
Yeah, I mean, his strategy for that campaign was excellent.
His strategy was probably the best one they had. I mean, up to that time. I plan on, I hope y'all are enjoying these as much as I have. I hope we had more participation tonight. I plan on having a couple of these a couple nights a week. Y'all in on them. And before we cut off, there's one time I want to talk to y'all something off air. Y'all got any other things y'all think we should talk about with McClellan?
Just one more thing, Chris. I think one of the things that hurt us tonight was starting so late, because it was 10:30 here in the East, and a lot of folks have to go back to work in the morning. I think that worked against us.
Unfortunately, I had to watch Ole Miss and Louisville. So, yeah, that you know, that like I don't know if y'all see my little post I had about football season. It said, you know, if somebody has died, don't call me. There's nothing I can do for them. And at that point, there's no sense in either one of us being sad.
I got a kick when I read that. I'm like, it's Saturday in the South. What else is going on today?
There you go.
And back during last year, I can't remember if I was playing Notre Dame in the playoffs or it was a national championship game, and I said, "Do not, under any circumstances, message me during this game."
I remember that.
Yeah.
I worked for 4 years. I was communications director for the South Carolina Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General of South Carolina is and still remains such a huge South Carolina football fan. We were not allowed to even talk about the game on Monday if South Carolina lost. And matter of fact, it was really a good idea to stay out of contact with him on that Monday.
Y'all must not talk a lot back then.
No, well, that was during the good years, during the Spurrier years.
Oh, now during the Spurrier years, yeah. I'll go ahead and stop this record now when we finish talking. Yeah, during the Spurrier years now, you know, that was
That's a different story now. Yeah.